Hello and welcome back to the John Bonjour Halloween Horror Club. I am John Bonjour. This is the Horror Club. We are discussing one of my new favorite movies of all time, Dario Argento's Suspiria. Before we jump into the full review of the movie, and trust me, there will be plenty to say, let's hop on over to the bar that's kind of a library, the library, for a quick drink. Welcome back to the bar. So, for Suspiria, I wanted to get a little creative, but honestly, I don't think I really need to for this, but I am going to do something a little bit different. The start of this movie is drenched in rain. It is literally a dark and stormy night. So I'm going to be making a dark and stormy, but I want to involve some cherry juice because I want it to feel creepier. I want it to be Bloodstorm. So that's what I'm calling it, Bloodstorm. Or darker, stormier, nighter. Bloodstorm is what it's going to be called. But we're going to start, and I forgot my jigger again, so we are going to start with some Kraken rum, a nice black spiced rum. For that, in the bottom of a glass, it looks like a skull. Isn't that fun? Now I'm going to throw some ice in, so I'll be right back. So a traditional dark and stormy would be the ginger beer and then a rum float on top so that it kind of settles in, so that it looks like a rainy cloud. I wanted to do something a little bit different, so I put the rum in the bottom. I want the ginger beer on top of that. Hopefully that kind of settles either layers or just kind of settles into a nice light color. My hope, and again, I can't stress this enough because I just don't try these beforehand, is that it's going to be kind of like the dark and stormy effect of having that rain settle in, but it's going to be with blood. At least that's the thought. Well, cherry juice. Cherry juice, not blood. We're going to crack open our ginger beer, get that a little shaken up. I go Fever Tree because it's the best. It's easily the best. Not a sponsor, just a truth. We're gonna pour that in really gently. I'm hoping these don't mix at all, but I think they're probably going to. So they definitely did mix, but you can see that it's a nice semi-light color. I'm gonna be using a spoon to kind of float it on. Off the back of the spoon here. Spilling, definitely spilling. So the cherry juice sunk to the bottom, and now it looks like a big old Coca-Cola. I'm just gonna stir it, I guess. That part didn't work almost at all. Maybe that footage looks cool. I really don't know. Normally you use lime with a dark and stormy. The cherry plays. It tastes good. Okay, I don't know if it looks like a dookie, but it tastes good. There you have it, a delicious tasting and terrible looking Duke and Stormy. It tastes so good. It looks so wrong. So, 1977, Dario Argento releases. I'm not gonna bury the lead at all. This is an absolute certified TM trademark banger. This is one of the greatest horror movies of all time. This is a movie that I have been reserving for a very, very, very long time. I did Phenomena, Dario Argento's another one of his movies, last year for the Halloween Horror Club. I have been saving Suspiria for two reasons. One, because everybody says that it's incredible, and two, because I kind of wasn't interested in watching it. It's a movie about an American girl going to this German ballet school and finding some sort of hidden secret that ends up being nefarious and scary. And I just wasn't really interested in that. I don't know. It's one of these things where it's like, I knew that I was gonna probably like the movie, but the idea of watching this long, boring Italian movie about some random ballet dancer was just not really on my bucket list, if I'm being honest. It just wasn't a thing that I was particularly interested in. And yes, that is me telling you that I am a guaranteed idiot. Never ever judge a book by its what you think it is what they say, and they're right. This is a movie that I cannot believe I waited this long to see. Dario Argento is a filmmaker that I don't think I really quite got. Phenomena I really liked, and I think I had seen a couple of his other movies, but I had never totally latched on or figured out what the Giallo style was or what Argento's specific style is, and I don't know if it's because this is his best movie or if it's because I just clicked into what he was doing, but this thing plays on absolutely every level for me. I'm gonna get into the good, I'm gonna get into the bad, what little of it there is to talk about, and then I'm gonna talk about my favorite moments. You know how this goes. It's gonna go the same way every time. A quick side note, I could really use more people to watch these because I put so much time and effort into these. Please send these videos to your horror-loving friends or people that don't love horror but might be interested in what they're about. Also, sorry I didn't tell you what the video is gonna be last week. Sorry I didn't tell you what this movie was. Let's get into Suspiria, Dario Argento's masterpiece. There's so much about this movie that works. In fact, I think 98% of the movie works. The thing that stood out to me from the very beginning is this dreamlike, ethereal photography of the whole film. The way that this movie is shot feels eerie and creepy and off-putting and just not quite right. But I think I've been thinking a lot about dream cinema because I think that there's a lot of good examples of this and a lot of bad examples of this. A lot of things that feel, it's so quick to feel meandering and pointless and random. I think the perfect version of dream cinema is a movie that literally feels like a dream in the sense that weird things are happening. It feels otherworldly. It feels grandiose and big and dramatic, but it also has this internal logic. It has this verisimilitude of the whole thing where when you're having a dream, everything that happens just kind of makes sense and you just sort of know stuff that you shouldn't necessarily know, but you have that information and it all just kind of works together because it's your brain processing these things. And I think a lot of movies really try for that kind of feeling, but a lot of them don't really land. I immediately jump to something like A Mad God, a movie that feels like a nightmare, which is its intended purpose. It's a brilliant film that I absolutely love, but it is, I think, a good example of a movie that feels dreamlike but doesn't feel like a dream, if that makes any sense. It doesn't have that verisimilitude. It doesn't have that internal logic. It's just a journey through random, horrifying nonsense, which is kind of what it's going for. Like, I think this isn't a criticism of Mad God at all, but it is a movie that I think is a good example of something that feels dream-like but doesn't feel like a dream. Weirdly, The Big Lebowski is a movie I think is like prime dream cinema. That is a movie that feels like a dream and feels dreamlike, and it just operates on this level that it doesn't totally make sense, and you don't really have to pay attention to the overarching story. You can, but you don't have to. Suspiria is now my newest, greatest example of what a dream cinema can be, what it's willing to achieve, or what it's able to achieve, I should say. This is so brilliantly shot from the very beginning. When we see Susie, our main character, she is walking through this airport, and there's this immediate feeling of strangeness because no one is talking, no one is smiling, no one is having any kind of interaction with the world. They're just carrying on, which kind of does feel like the airport, to be fair, but it is very strange and it feels very odd. And then she steps out of the airport into the absolute drenched, pouring rain, and it's this very spooky, haunted, empty, vast kind of feeling that is so immediately well communicated. The way that they like zoom in closer and closer on the door, there's some creepy imagery, like there's just something about the editing and the shooting that makes this movie feel so odd. And I'm trying to like find the words as I make this. I don't write these beforehand. I have some notes on what I kind of want to talk about, but I don't write these beforehand. It's just this quiet, unsettling feeling of dread more than anything else, and you can't quite put your finger on why. Throughout the whole movie, that is true. I think the first probably 20 minutes of this movie are my favorite section of it, just because it was like my expectations were so strange, so all over the place. Like I was nervous that I wasn't gonna like it. I was also nervous that it was gonna be just like kind of a normal giallo movie. I've had some misses on this season of the John Bonjour Halloween Horror Club, so I was a little bit worried that it was gonna be a thing that I just kind of had to be like, yeah, it was okay. It wasn't really for me. I wanted either to hate it so that I could have something to say, like Hocus Pocus, or to love it so that I could have something more positive to say. And this firmly falls in the second category, thank God. But those first 20 minutes were me testing the waters, or more, if I'm being honest, the waters of the film testing me. I was sucked in so instantly to this film that it was like, within the first 2 minutes of the movie, I was fully locked in, to the point that I watched this on Tubi because I didn't want to pay money for it. The commoditization of movies is a bad thing, and putting ads in the middle of movies is obviously not the way it was intended to be seen. But my point is, I watched this on Tubi with ads, and I was still locked in every time the movie came back on, which is like, it's already impressive when I'm watching a movie alone if I don't get distracted by my phone. Like, I very often have to put my phone in another room or whatever, just because probably an addiction of some sort, but we can deal with that later. But I couldn't put my phone in the other room because I had to take notes. And it was like the movie was segmented into instant breaks where I could have been distracted. And every time it came back on, the phone was down immediately because this movie is just so engrossing. And again, my point is the first 20 minutes of the movie is when Susie lands. She can't get a cab for a very long time. She finally does. They're driving through the rain in this really weird forest for what feels like forever. She lands at the school. She ends up at the school, sees this girl like walking out, running out, being kicked out, essentially, just screaming. And then we kind of follow that girl for a little bit. Susie doesn't get let into the school, but that's, we're not going to go beat by beat for this. And that takes us to another hotel, which leads us into the first kill of the movie, which was already a surprise for me. I had expected this movie for some reason. My expectations for this really threw me off, but I had expected this for some reason to feel like an A24, more modern, elevated horror kind of thing. I thought this was going to be creepy imagery, weird things happening, kind of unexplained vibes for most of the movie that then eventually boils over into this violent conclusion. Not that I don't love those kinds of things, but I kind of didn't want to watch one of those the night that I watched it last night. So I was like, I'm not sure that I'm going to like this because it's not really the vibe that I'm in. And the movie is pretty immediately like, great, it's not the vibe I'm putting out there into the world. So this is kind of a giallo. Like, in a lot of ways, this is a classic giallo, which is a very, very welcome surprise. For those of you who don't know, a giallo is an Italian slasher movie, basically. There's a couple of things that really define it. Very often gloved, shrouded, sometimes literally masked, but very often just shrouded in darkness. Killers. It's always a mystery. You're trying to figure out what's going on. The shadows are striking. The vibes are immaculate. Like, it's just this, there's a very specific energy to a giallo that I have grown to love. I didn't love them originally, but I have grown to love what they're bringing to the table. And it was such a welcome surprise to see that this was one. And I would argue maybe the most effective one I've ever seen. The first kill is, I'm just gonna get ahead of it, my favorite moment of the movie. It is this shocking, brutal, gory, violent, yes, all of these things, but genuinely beautifully shot and beautifully done death where we're cutting back and forth between someone screaming that there's a killer on the loose and the person being killed. And it starts with this very close, intimate stabbing, which is already horrifying and brilliantly acted. And then it builds and builds and builds into this. The end of the kill is that this woman's face is like pushed through a stained glass window, and then she is also pushed through the stained glass roof, and she falls and is hung by some kind of cord or light or whatever that is. The way that this plays out is a perfect example of that brutalistic, dreamlike, heightened sensibility that this movie has that I think is its greatest strength. It does not care about being a realistic movie. Most of this movie, and this is another thing that I absolutely love about this, most of this movie is just drenched in red, green, or blue lighting. It is very, 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 very rarely lit naturally. There's very few points where you feel like, oh yeah, this is just a scene in a room where something's happening. It always feels dramatic, heightened, pushed to the limit. I think the lighting is just gorgeous. Like, I am blown away by this feeling of this is a piece of art first and foremost. And yes, it's a story, but so much of the time we consume film based on the story that they're telling us. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But I think a lot of the time with things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or Star Wars or Star Trek or, like all of our genre pieces, we tend to kind of focus on, well, yeah, how does this further the story? What's the story that's being told? And that's the key prime feature. And I am kind of obsessed with this movie that is very little interested in telling a story, to the point that the final reveal of the movie, spoilers if you haven't seen it, is that this is actually was originally an occult school where a coven of witches was running their dark bidding, doing their dark stuff, whatever you call it, the witchcraft. They were doing witchcraft out of the school and potentially teaching it. They just kind of paper mache'd over that and called it a ballet school when some of the witches were caught. And then it's this thing where you see that like the headmistress and all the people who are higher ups in this are actually witches, and they're doing all this kinds of witchcraft, and they're trying to keep everything together and make sure that Susie doesn't break all of this whole thing and burn it to the ground. I think that's so interesting because as a reveal, I think that's very good. The way that it's done is not shocking. I suppose this is one of my criticisms of the movie. The reveal is not surprising, in the least. We kind of figured it was witches when the entire score is just witch. When you get to the point where they're like, oh, it turns out actually it was witches, you're like, you were telling us that. You've been telling us that the whole time. And at first I was a little disappointed by that. But the longer I've sat in it, the longer I sit in the movie, and it's like halfway through that the reveal has happened. Maybe a little bit later than halfway through. But it's earlier than you would kind of expect a reveal like that to happen. It's not the final thing that happens. So you have that going for it, where it really does get to play in this space of being a school of witchcraft, in this place where she wasn't completely not expecting that. But also, it kind of doesn't matter because, yeah, you told us that it was witches, so it's not really shocking that it's witches. But what's important is the way that the film breathes and feels. And the way that the film breathes and feels is spooky as hell and extremely engaging. So it's this thing where I'm like, yeah, the reveal doesn't work. But you know what does work? The absolute ass blaster of a score by Goblin. Like, Goblin is the band that made the score for the movie Suspiria. And I know that horror fans out there are going to be like, yeah, dog, like we've known this all for years, but I am experiencing this for the first time. The filming is so strange. The editing is really weird. It like is jumpy here and there, and it's surprising. It's inventive. This is just an absolutely phenomenal piece of art. Outside of film, outside of story, outside of Giallo, outside of Dario Argento's work, this is a thing that inspires creativity in me. And that is awesome. Like, so rarely is a horror movie able to do that for me. And I love Suspiria for that. The other thing that I think is so integral to this film working, something that matters so deeply, is that this is a horror movie, and a horror movie kind of has to be either scary or funny or entertaining on some level. And this is a little funny, and this is very entertaining, but holy shit, Suspiria is a very scary movie, which is always surprising anytime a movie comes out from the 70s, anytime I watch a 70s movie, or 60s through 80s movie. And it scares me. I'm a little bit surprised because somewhere deep in my stupid little brain, I kind of get this sense that like, well, yeah, I've seen so many scarier movies. We've made scarier shit than whatever they could have made at the time. So like, I'm not gonna get scared by this. This came out in the 70s. I understand it's stupid, but it is also a little bit true in the sense that like things that may have been scary aren't necessarily scary. Psycho right now is not as scary as it was when the movie came out. When it came out, people were saying that they felt like they had been violated by the terror-inducing horror of the film. And Psycho to me is a moderately creepy fun time. And I think it's very interesting that those two things can be true. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a criticism of the movie. And depending on how much you engage with, say, Psycho, you will get the same experience out of it, kind of. But there is a cultural relevance to it as well. Generally speaking, the culture has exposed more and more of the nerve as we've kind of moved on through time. So things that used to be scary aren't necessarily scary. They're more mundane, more normal to us now, which is probably not a good thing. Like the more I say this, the more it's like, this isn't a brag that we're making scarier movies or whatever. I do think there is a benefit to that this could be a whole other video, quite honestly. But as we've moved on through time, movies have gotten scarier and more aggressive and stronger and just technically better. So it's always amazing to me when a movie can frighten me from the 70s. And Dario Argento's Suspiria is a movie that scared me pretty bad a bunch of times. There's a lingering dread throughout the whole thing that kind of builds and builds and builds the entire movie to the point that there are so many creative shots that are really uniquely executed that I don't know if it's creative and unique because it's building to a scare, or if it's creative and unique because Dario Argento was just a creative and unique filmmaker. Like, I'm not sure which direction it's ever gonna take. So there's, at one point, we pan up from Susie in her bed. There's another, one of the friends who's trying to help her like solve this mystery is also there. Somebody's coming in the door. Her friend has to run, and the camera like pans up all the way to the ceiling and frames Susie in a light bulb. And I don't know how they even did that. Like, I don't even understand how you would begin to shoot a scene like that. And B, it doesn't really build to anything specific. Like, it doesn't lead to some scary hand grabbing the bulb, or it doesn't lead to some pop out jump scare monster creature. It really is just an interestingly executed shot. In the same way, there's another one where my other kind of negative of the movie is that they take a hard stop for Susie to go kind of just hear about some exposition about witches. Like, she just goes, talks to a couple of guys in the outdoors, and it's just kind of like, anyway, here's some stuff you should know about witches going forward for the rest of the movie. And it's a little bit of an awkward moment because it's like pretty clear that that's what we're getting toward. But it is also shot so weird and so interesting. And like it's not just one for one head on, you know, it's not an A-B shot. It's wide shots mixed with very close-ups, mixed with these weird like close-up kind of low angle shots. So it's just somebody's head and sky behind them, which is very interesting. And then my favorite shot, one of my favorite shots in all of horror, maybe all of cinema, we are looking at Susie and this other kind of professor doctor guy. And behind them is like a window that's kind of mirrored. And you can see them, and you can see them in the window mirror. And then it zooms in, it like pans forward past Susie and the guy, and like you don't see them in the foreground anymore. Now the shot is just them in the mirror reverse shot. I don't know why we did that. Like, I don't know what the purpose of that was. It doesn't necessarily communicate anything intrinsically, but it's part of that kind of dreamlike filmmaking. It's part of that unsettling, just strangeness. And it's also one of the most interesting shots I've ever seen, because you shift focus of the shot throughout the shot. Like, I don't understand, but it's the same. I understand it conceptually. I don't understand how you could set that shot up and think about that and plan that, or did it just happen on the day? Like, I genuinely don't know how much of this is great planning and how much of this is being like, wouldn't it be kind of kick-ass? Whichever it is, I think it's absolutely insane that they came up with what they were able to come up with for this. I love every second of Suspiria, and it is a genuinely scary movie. There are multiple kill sequences, chase sequences, scare moments, one of which I think is just heinous, and it's the girl who was in her room before and is trying to help her solve the mystery, and there's this chase, and she locks herself in this room which has like a little window off to the side. Anyway, she realizes that she has to, because the guy's trying to like break the lock, so she realizes that she has to like put these things up to get out the window, and then she can crawl through that window out into the hallway, whatever. So she does all of that. It's already a tense scene because the guy is trying to like break the lock with a knife, which is a great visual. It's really interesting. He's like trying to pop the lock. She's trying to get up, but these things are kind of falling as she's getting there, so she's like crawling up into this tiny window, and it's a tense moment, and she gets through the window, and there's a brief moment of reprieve until she falls into a room full of barbed wire. It's this surprise, unexpected, you have no idea what's coming, and then she's struggling against the barbed wire before the guy comes in and kills her. I'm blown away by the artistry and the craft displayed in Suspiria. It is exceptional. And that's all, by the way, before we get to the final act of the movie. Final act of the movie, we've heard about this creepy headmistress. There's a great silhouette shot of the headmistress, so there's already a mystery presented around her. And then we see her, Susie walks into her room after finding this hidden backlot room where all the witches do all of their stuff. She eventually fights her way to Helena Marcos, is the headmistress or whatever they call her. Like, the end of the movie is brilliant because it's engaging because you're trying to solve the mystery and you're figuring all of that out. It's engaging because you want to see what these witches are capable of. It's engaging because her friend is there, resurrected from the dead, really effective makeup, really, really scary. And the film ends with her burning the school down, walking out, and credits just rolling over footage of the school burning as we hear the witches screaming. It's a very scary ending. It's a very successful ending, and then it kind of fades back into the goblin score. It is indescribable how quickly this went from a thing that I had very little interest in watching to one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I cannot recommend Suspiria highly enough if you haven't seen it. Even if you heard all that I just said about that, if you know the whole story, I promise you, this is a movie that's worth it because it is a display of art. I want to watch this movie over and over again. I want the Blu-ray for this so bad. I can only imagine that Arrow has put out an insane release of this, and I really want it. Huge fan of Suspiria. I loved it. I'm so glad that I chose this for our Halloween horror club, and I appreciate you guys being here to watch it. It really does mean a lot. Tune in next week, by the way, because we are going to be... What is next week? Oh, okay. Next week, we will be reviewing Dark Harvest from a couple of years ago. I have not seen the movie, but I have heard it's very good. Thank you so much for watching this video and checking out my channel. If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on movies, comics, TV shows, horror movies, giallo, anything of the like, please do hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and comment down below which you'd like me to review next. Or do none of those things because I am not your dad.